Good morning. This is Professor Roger Louis Martínez-Dávila at the University of Colorado Springs and a member of the Plus Ultra Collective. Welcome to our workshop on born digital storytelling. It's good to have you here today, and we're just going to get started right away. So I'll hand it off to Dr. Schechter. Patricia, please.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm Patricia Schechter. I'm a professor of history at Portland State University in Oregon, and I'm really honored to be here with you today. Sorry, I just want to do the right thing with my slides here. I am a professor of history at Portland State, as I mentioned, and I teach, technically I teach U.S. history, but I did a mid-career shift a couple of years ago and decided to focus on global history, catch up with my colleagues in the history department, catch up with global history. And so I turned my attention to kind of the Iberian Atlantic. I had worked a little bit on Puerto Rico. My mother is a Spanish immigrant. So I had a kind of story to tell in my family history about Spain. And so I ended up writing a book. Took me about 10 years, but I got it done. Ended up writing a book about my grandmother's village, my mother's village in Andalusia, a town called Pueblo Nuevo del Terrible. And a real driver behind that project was to place my family members, particularly my grandparents and great-grandparents, in the Spanish Civil War. And so I did that, and it was an amazing journey. And then the question was, when I finished it, how to really get my work out there, how to get this story to connect to new audiences. I was trained in U.S. history, so my publishing contacts were not as helpful in terms of getting an Iberian, a Spanish story out to new audiences. And I was very determined as well to have the book published in Spanish. So I write in English. I'm fairly bilingual, but I write in English, and I needed it translated, and I need to find a Spanish publisher, and I was really at sea. And so I had to do a lot of cold calling, and one of my investigations of activating colleagues and friends from past and present was to reach out to my one of my my undergraduate college mentors. So don't be shy, right? This is one of the lessons here. Reach out. In this very unclear world we're living in about, authorpreneurship, if you will, you've got to cast a wide net because we're all learning. So I learned through communications from, alumni communications from my undergraduate school, Mount Holyoke College in Western Mass, that one of my mentors had retired after 41 years. So I just sent Dan Citram is his name, also U.S. historian. I sent him an email just congratulating him on his retirement, and turns out he had written a book about the Spanish Civil War as well and was having trouble publishing it. So my comments to you today are really about two kind of senior scholars, if you will, sort of late career historians, how two non-podcasting historians created a podcast. And the upshot of our conversations when we got reconnected over Zoom, because he's in Massachusetts and I'm in Oregon, was to do something new. And that was to do this podcast. So I'm going to talk to you about three things about the genesis of this project, that it was really, as my prologue suggests, conceived in consternation, born in collaboration, and received now a year later in kindness. So a few more details. This is the podcast we had ended up developing, Family Secrets of the Spanish Civil War. So as I've sort of suggested, here's me, here's Dan Citram, here's a little promo that Mount Holyoke ended up doing with us. Conceived in consternation, turning to technology because we sort of had to. We really didn't know what to do. We were two experienced, well-published scholars trying to land their newest work in a publishing world, and certainly an academic publishing world, which you may agree with me, you may not, but from my point of view, is really in disarray. So, and we also were sort of changing genres and topics. So my networks were in US history, but here I had written a book on Spain. So I was really at a disadvantage. For Dan too, he had written a memoir, really about his family's experience as communists, for, their decades long experience as committed leftists in the United States, which included a commitment to this Republican cause in the Spanish Civil War. We had new goals for our work at this point, which technology seemed to suggest itself as an important piece of the puzzle. We wanted new audiences. We wanted expanded audiences. Dan knew that, of course, memoir is a really glutted genre. So how do you distinguish yourself? For me, again, I needed to learn how to network with people in Spain. I mean, I had my certain number of, connections, but I needed them in the publishing and reading and library worlds. So we had new audiences that we didn't know how to reach. And so those were some of the consternations and a few of things we had going for us. It wasn't a complete crisis. We had background in public history and exhibits. I had done a lot of work in oral history. And Dan had worked on a number of documentaries. So we had some out of the box, out of the, sort of between two hardcovers kind of scholarly experience, but we needed a fresh way to think about our next stage of our work. And so we really didn't have any experience with podcasting, but we decided, basically we would have these long Zoom calls and Dan's just like, I don't know who to talk to. I don't know what to do. And I said, what we should do? We should do a podcast. And literally, it was almost a therapeutic kind of consolation undertaking initial, that we wanted to help each other sort of articulate the value of our work by talking it through together. I mean, at least you're not alone. At least you're with one person. So we'd have, that community within the conversation. And it turned out that that was a good first step. And what's happened is we have been able to cross promote our work. That was another idea, that not just we talk through our projects to hone our pitches and to surface, the important things to try to circulate and try to put in front of audiences, but we could also help promote one another. So both on an individual level and an organizational level. And I'll never forget the first thing Dan said when I proposed this podcast. He says, but I don't listen to podcasts. And I said, well, neither do I. So we knew we were starting almost from zero. And we knew we couldn't do everything, as my third bullet here says, not to try to do anything, but we had to quickly identify colleagues and resources who could help. So what you see on the right-hand side, some images here, are some of our successes and failures. Who can help us? So our first thought was radio stations, that we had relationships with some radio stations where the equipment is. I had been interviewed a few times on campus, and Dan too, at his local public radio station in Western Mass. So sort of hit up the campus radio station at Portland State. So you see me on the top there with one of our student engineers. And we thought, oh, this is the way to go. And turns out not so much. The radio station really couldn't accommodate us. It was student run. And we did a couple of sessions, but it really was not going to be sustainable on campus. So we had to try other things. And really what we ended up doing was just doing it over Zoom. And the only thing I had to buy was this little Go microphone. And away we went. We got some coaching. You see another picture of me down below with another Portland State University. This is an alum named Josh Lee. So he has his own recording studio down the street. And we ended up doing my audiobook with him this past fall. You have to find people who can help you. And I had another colleague at Portland State who decided to go out on his own. So every time we do an issue of the podcast, I actually take the Zoom recordings, the audio recordings, and I create the edits on a Google Doc or Word doc, and I send them to colleague/friend who edits them and uploads them. So we create the interviews, we create the content, but we do kind of outsource, if you will, some of the engineering that goes with creating a more professional grade product. And we have music, so we integrate some of that, and just to give it a nice flow. And that's just not something that I was able to teach myself quickly enough, but luckily I had friends and colleagues who were willing to do this for us. And, as I say, we had some failures. The radio station thing didn't work. I wrote a number of grants. I couldn't get anybody to bite on. We made different kinds of pitches to again, public radio and so forth. But, those didn't work. But we managed to put together collaborations that got us where we are today. I'm on episode 10. So again, I think some of the things I'm sort of highlighting here today is the kind of surprise factor that, we really didn't have a lot of experience at all, but that we could learn along the way, and that people were incredibly receptive to what we were doing. Our friends, our colleagues, and then some key institutional support. So my takeaway here is sort of the whole project was received in kindness. And if you're wondering out there, like, who's going to listen to my podcast, where does it belong? How many likes will I get? We had those concerns as well. But when you start with your layers of networks, I have been so honored, really, and very pleasantly surprised at how receptive people were to lifting up this podcast and circulating it. So again, just surprised by the amount of cross-pollination in the digital world that gets more and more wired, every season. There's growth. People are sharing these podcasts, these episodes. It's less about likes and followers for us, and it's more about how the people we interview and us as hosts, we share episodes, and then those episodes kind of go out into other ecosystems. So they sort of pop up in wonderful places that people get to see them and enjoy them, and it creates more community. So for example, the Alba, you see the Alba News clip here on the screen on the right-hand side. Alba is the Abraham Lincoln Brigade Archive. It's a foundation, it's an educational institution and an archive. And they have lifted up this podcast to share with colleagues and friends in their huge list that's all over the world. And I got a call last month, an email from a guy in Granada, Spain, who was like, I want to be on your podcast. So people just, basically people call me up all the time and say they want to be on the show. Never would have expected it. So a wonderful man named Pablo Lopez, he's kind of a self-taught expert on La Desbandada, which is the basically death march from Malaga to Almeria in February 1937 during the Spanish Civil War. And he's developed some educational materials and even a role-playing game that's kind of taken off regionally in Spain. And so he wanted to find an audience in English. He's published his little how-to book in English and Spanish. He's very bilingual and excellent. So he found me, and pretty much about once a month or so, I get a call and somebody wants to be in my show. They've got a book, they've got a project that intersects with our themes, and away we go. So just to wrap up here, this is what our YouTube page looks like, Family Secrets of the Spanish Civil War. So you can listen for free on YouTube. It's also visible on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And I'm the last person who a year into this would have thought we were on episode 10. I thought we were going to do 5 episodes, just me and Dan, talking about our work and, having these assets to share. But it has, in a small way, but a meaningful way, taken off and produced just a very rewarding and rich experience. So I do have, I set up my taxes. I have my own business, but I also set up my taxes so that I can deduct things as a writer. So if you're thinking, how much is this going to cost me? Basically, it costs me $100 to do every podcast, because I pay my engineer to edit with the music and actually do the uploads. I mean, that's just something I could not master sufficiently in enough time. So it does cost me a little money, but I get to write it off my taxes. And again, just the reward, the networking, less the likes and more the sharing of assets in multiple platforms, in multiple sectors of the scholarly ecosystem has been a really unexpected pleasure and very rewarding. So thank you, Roger. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, everyone, for your attention this morning and this opportunity to chat. And I look forward to answering any questions you might have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Patricia. I think, the important point here is that there's no one right way to do any of this type of work, right? And also to kind of get over, maybe you have some reluctance to do a project you've been thinking about, but the best thing is just to kind of jump out there and see what happens, and that can be a really good experience. I like how Patricia also kind of laid out some of those pieces, and I think she's preparing us, for a really nice group discussion afterwards, about everything from the mechanics to, why we do these types of works and similar. So let me go ahead and hand off to Andrea Davis. Andrea, please.
Thank you. Let me share. Is that visible? Hello?
Not yet.
Oh, not yet. Okay, let's see. Let's try that again. So I'm going to do my entire screen. Screen 2, share. And now.
Yep, we see it now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Patricia, Roger, and everyone in attendance this morning. Today, I'll be talking about the opportunities and challenges of creating Born Digital scholarly publications. I'll start with a brief introduction to this new and emerging field before turning to my forthcoming title, Voices, Narratives, and Memories of Francoism, or VNMF for short. Because Born Digital scholarly publications rely on diverse platforms and tools, I'll focus less on technical matters and more on the broader questions that authors need to consider as they develop their own projects and pitch them to funders and university presses. I'll then walk through how I address these questions for VNMF. And of course, now I lost my screen. Oh, what just happened? I am so sorry. I don't know what just.
Don't worry, just take your time.
Am I still sharing?
We don't see it right now, but it might have just
weird.
paused.
I'm sorry. Anyway, so I'm going to start by talking about what this field of Born Digital scholarly publishing is. I'm going to walk through some of sort of the major questions we have to ask when we do this work, walk through how I answer those questions with my project, and then I'm going to conclude with an interactive demonstration related to some of these topics. So first, to define Born Digital scholarly publishing. It's basically the formal publication of long-form scholarly work that is exclusively digital and cannot be replicated in print. And in the United States, this practice has emerged in response to a variety of intersecting concerns and developments, particularly within the humanities and humanistic social sciences. First and foremost, the practice seeks to promote enhanced engagement and access to scholarship through the production of media-rich, interactive, and open outputs. Second, it represents a serious inquiry into how new technologies and forms of communication can express fundamentally new things. Third, and finally, it addresses the professional needs of a new generation of scholars who require venues for their experimental work to be peer-reviewed and disseminated so that their contributions can be legible to the broader academic community. My Born Digital scholarly publication constructs a polyphonic history of the long legacies of Francoism. Employing reparative methods, VNMF seeks to redress the physical and archival violence of the Francoist dictatorship by providing access to enhanced audiovisual testimonies of victims and witnesses, alongside deeply contextualized video segments that provide historical insight into the diverse communities of experience represented in the collection. And the collection I'm using is the Spanish Civil War Memory Project, which is based at UC San Diego. I was very lucky to be a graduate student researcher that worked on that project under the direction of Luis Martin Cabrera. And I've really spent years thinking about how to listen and engage with these interviewees. So the first chapter of the monograph, Archive Stories After Franco, situates the testimonies in the moment of collection by tracing how social and institutional hurdles hindered access to intimate knowledge about the executions of the 1930s and 40s until the 2000s. And as many of you know, this is still an ongoing sort of struggle and investigation. The second chapter, which goes back to early Francoism, deals with document troubles, and it examines how the identification practices of early Francoism enshrined the logic of national Catholicism to shape legal relations, lawful subjects, and practices of authority and recognition in Spain. Chapter 3, which I think has a really exciting overlap with Patricia's work, which is why I'm going to focus on it a little bit today, explores family strategies for negotiating political identities in the face of harsh repressive and disciplinary measures. And Chapter 4 maps out the reemergence of public life during the global 1960s as Spain was open to the outside world. Finally, the conclusion builds on the archival and historical thinking skills elaborated in the monograph to provide users with strategies for critically interpreting the collection and oral histories more broadly. Now I'd like to take a look at some excerpts from the chapter on intimate political identities to walk through the project's digital storytelling methods. Divided into two parts, the chapter first maps out family strategies represented in the collection, including depoliticization, accommodation, and refusal. It then examines the intimate dynamics of resistance surrounding the Partido Comunista de España, which was the only organized force of opposition that survived the entire dictatorship intact. And while the first part of the chapter focuses exclusively on the period of early Francoism, arguing that these initial strategies limited the long-term transmission of political identities, the second part traces the intimate consequences of the Communist Party's major policy developments through late Francoism, concluding that the continuity of the party provided communist militants and sympathizers with enduring frameworks for interpreting the dictatorship and the family silences produced by the conditions of oppression and resistance. And of course, this argument also relates to interviewees who come from other political communities and identities, where you can really see that sort of this lack of continuity makes it hard to piece in those family secrets, as Patricia calls them. So this excerpt here explores the family strategy of accommodation through the testimony of Jose Maria Ruiz Garcia. And here I'd like to draw your attention to the pop-up notes that are circled in red in the text, which provide users with additional biographical and historical context as featured on the left-hand side of the screen. And not only do these pop-up notes allow me to tell a more streamlined story, which I hope will make it more accessible to public audiences, but they also serve as an invitation for further exploration for diverse communities with different needs, allowing users to open up the note as well as access additional information by clicking on that blue Go to Note link, which will bring them to the following pages. And the testimony page for Jose Maria, which is featured on the left, provides access to the biography, the complete interview with Spanish or English language transcriptions, the tagged terms associated with the testimony, and a bulleted list of the scholarly sections that feature the interview. And here I just do want to comment quickly. These interviews on average are anywhere from about 40 minutes to 8 hours. It's probably a collection that's approximately 250 hours of recorded video. And as for, you might note that this biography is really short, and the purpose of the biography is really to provide sort of basic information about who this interviewee is, and also what their contribution to the broader field of historical memory is. So this very short biography actually indicates that this interviewee, Jose Maria, is not necessarily a public person, hasn't written a memoir, isn't necessarily participating in the disinterment of mass graves, etc. So these biographies really depend on the individual. And then on the right, the term page for auxilio social includes sort of that contextual historical definition. It includes a list of all the interviewees that are tagged with this term, and also an interactive visualizations, which allows users to explore the multiple term-based connections between interviewees. And this can be a really helpful way to really explore the broader collection, especially if you know what you're looking for, or if you're looking for interviewees who might have a whole bunch of overlaps.
Yo estuve en mi pueblo muy...
This excerpt addresses the intimate networks of support that emerged around the prison during early Francoism. And this is really a setup to later explore how the Communist Party transformed these kinds of intimate networks into direct mechanisms of opposition during late Francoism. And here I use a video segment from the interview with Francisco González Vicente to illustrate the sacrifices that many rural families made to support their political prisoners. And here I'm going to play that excerpt.
Yo estuve en mi pueblo muy poco tiempo. Estuve, claro, los 3 años de guerra, o 4, luego ya cuando en el 42 o 43, por ahí, a mi padre y a mis tíos, a todos, ya los trasladaron primero a Ocaña y luego a Carabanchel. Pues claro, la familia tenía que ir detrás, porque a Uclés, bueno, pues mal que bien, había un tren que iba desde Huete y que las llevaba, que iba a Madrid y paraba en Uclés, que eso fue otras odiseas. Yo no sé si conocerás que en todas las estaciones, cuando se salía, había unos inspectores, digámoslo así, en la que te abrían las bolsas y llevabas... pues si llevabas extraperlo, que decía, es decir, comidas y tal, que luego revendías. Entonces, claro, toda la comida que se llevaba a las cárceles no podía pasar por la estación, porque se lo hubieran quitado. ¿Qué es lo que hacían mi madre y mis tías y demás? En un punto determinado, cuando pasaba el tren, que ya disminuía un poco la velocidad, tirarlo por las ventanillas. Tiraban. Y luego por la noche, cuando ya estaba todo eso, volvían a intentar recoger lo estaban de manera que no se rompiera o que tal, a recoger esa comida y llevarla hasta la casa para luego llevarla a las cárceles. Y desde mi pueblo, desde La Peraleja, hasta donde pasaba el tren, que era Caracenilla, ahí me parece que son 11 kilómetros. En verano muy bien, pum, 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 con la fresquita, pero en invierno, cuando nevaba, iban medio descalza, porque tampoco había bambas de esas grandes y había de esos buenos calzados que hay ahora para la nieve o para tal, sino que con lo que podían iban hasta pisando la nieve, esos 11 kilómetros, a coger el tren. Y si llovía, pues encima del barro. Y eso todo eso lo he vivido. Todo eso te tiene que formar a la fuerza. A la fuerza te tiene que ir formando desde niño, que lo vas viendo. Y bueno, se habla de los campos de concentración, de todo esto, cómo iban, tal. Es que yo eso lo he vivido desde niño prácticamente aquí con mi familia. Lo he vivido. El heroísmo de esas mujeres, que no solamente era mi madre, mis tías y tal, en toda España era por el estilo, me imagino, porque toda España estaba igual. ¿Eh? Y esa represión continuada y continuada y continuada y que ha continuado hasta sus últimas consecuencias, hasta prácticamente su muerte, fusilando y fusilando y fusilando.
As you can see with this video, I try not to simply cherry pick quotes, but to respect the integrity of the story or recollection as it is elaborated by the interviewee. My hope is that this approach will allow users to develop bonds with the interviewees and that this bond will prompt further analysis and exploration. I'd now like to turn to some of the broader questions that authors need to address as they develop their own Born Digital scholarly publications and pitch them to funding agencies and university presses. These questions include: what digital assets and platforms will be used? Why is technological intervention necessary? How does the publication deviate from established genres? And finally, how will it be sustained or preserved? While these questions may be difficult to answer at different stages of development, it is important to sketch out estimates and goals to establish a clear sense of your project's needs, its scope, and feasibility. To give you a better sense of what these questions entail, I'd like to walk through how I answer them for VNMF. The question about digital assets and platforms, as you can see from this very cluttered slide, taps into a range of broader issues. For example, the hosting and use of digital assets touches on potential stakeholders and institutional relations, while the way in which these assets are processed frequently points to one of the most laborious aspects of a project. In the case of VNMF, the process of machine and human-assisted transcription, translation, and review counted on the 4-year collaboration of close to 50 affiliated researchers from across North America and Europe. Likewise, conversations surrounding the selection, maintenance, and/or development of a digital platform also indicate or can indicate the extent to which our institutions are or are not able to provide technical resources and support. Because Born Digital scholarly publications are costly to maintain and generally exempt from monetization, the onus is on the author not only to justify the necessity of technical intervention, but also increasingly to offer up substantial subvention funds to underwrite the cost of digital production. Not to mention the costs that go into development in the first place. And as you can see here, I have 2 major justifications for VNMF. Technical intervention not only facilitates the construction of a witness-centered narrative that shares embodied authority with the interviewees, but it also allows users to follow nonlinear pathways to explore the multiple contextualized through lines that cut across the broader collection. As for genre, VNMF is both a monograph and an enhanced collection. And moreover, these components of the digital publication are consciously and carefully interwoven so as to constitute a hybrid form, further justifying the necessity of technical intervention. While the question of sustainability and preservation increasingly falls within the purview of the press, it is an important author consideration as it reminds us to save our data outside of our selected platforms in non-proprietary formats. This is imperative not only to protect our research from technological glitches and obsolescence, but to help us keep a running inventory of our project's component parts and I think also to make really tough questions about sort of what is necessary for our project in terms of those component parts, and what are sort of additional component parts that we'd like, or that might be really nice, really aesthetically pleasing, but which sort of aren't that necessary. And so I think having that running inventory really keeps us honest in a lot of different ways. And on the publisher's side, especially in terms of this question of preservation, I think the press that has really sort of established itself as a leader in the field is Stanford University Digital Projects, which was originally funded by the Mellon Foundation and has just now started accepting projects again. They're really a leader in terms of both production, dissemination, and preservation. And I highly recommend, if you're looking for a sense of sort of the diversity of this field right now, that's where I would go to get a sense of this diversity. And so they're a leader in terms of their catalog of born digital scholarly publications, almost half of which have won major awards. They're also a leader in terms of making born digital publication discoverable in library databases, which is really important in terms of sort of locating resources. They're especially a leader in terms of their implementation of a multi-pronged approach to preservation that really accounts for the future needs of both different users and sort of very different possible technological landscapes. And so their approach includes a web archive that presents a high fidelity interactive version of the publication. They also save the component parts of a digital project in a repository where your media files, textual content, and code can be deposited. And then finally, they develop documentation, which includes a descriptive account of the original publication's user experience, structure, and sources. So they're a really good model for thinking about the kinds of ways in which preservation is happening right now. I'd now like to conclude the formal part of my presentation. Based on audience interest, we can transition into some sort of interactive demonstration or conversation, which could entail a back-end tour of the Scalar 2 platform, which I use. It could be an overview of project management materials we developed during our 4-year collaboration, or it could be a conversation about the challenges of doing this kind of work with limited funding, or really any other related topic of your choosing. So I'll leave it there, and thank you. I'll try to stop my my video if I can. Stop sharing. Okay.
Fantastic. Thank you both. I think this is what's really wonderful about this. We see the full span, right? You can see the full span. So what both are just incredible projects. So I'm going to hand it off to Andrea and Patricia to manage Q&A. Unfortunately, I have to step off in a couple minutes for another engagement, but please, folks, let's continue this conversation.
Roger, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Maybe are folks going to if you put your questions in the chat or raise your hand, however you want to do this. But with your permission, I will just say, Andrea, the quality, meticulousness, the sophistication of what you're doing is so impressive. And I just salute you for your dedication to this. I think I moaned for a moment. It took me 10 years to write a book, but like what you're doing is not just a high scholarly commitment, but truly a labor of love, it seems to me. And I think a wonderful link between our projects has to do with the incomparable quality of the human voice and the way in which we're compelled to listen. And there's just something deeply humanizing and potentially transformative in that. And I just want to lift that up and thank you for that. I'm about to have tears again because what Pepin was testifying about is my mother's story, not in prison, but just everyday people. She used to go down to the train station, and the more wealthy relatives would throw bags of food because my mother's family was starving. My grandfather was an anarchist. Thank God he wasn't shot, but it just brings it back. These are the family stories and secrets of the Spanish Civil War. And so it's also meaningful to me personally, as well as, again, such a shining professional standard you're setting. So just thank you for your work.
Patricia, you're going to make me cry, and your constant support in this field, and also model to look up to. I saw Roger had a question. Since we're talking so much about voice and community, if people are comfortable and want to just turn on their microphones and videos, and we can do this as a very human conversation. It's of course not required, and I know other privacy concerns, but please feel free.
Yeah, thank you both. I guess, kind of my question is just like a bigger question or observation is like, I wonder what other people are thinking about this whole role of, usually, historians, writers, we're really kind of this mediator between the story, the real stories, the real archive of people or documents, and then we interpret, and then we try to tell a story. Can you tell me maybe about your own thinking about, like, when you decide, okay, I want to present this person to the world and let them tell their story? Why did you make that choice? What were you thinking about? Why is this important for them to speak and not for me to speak for them?
That's sort of the question that's, I think, central to my work, to our work. I just, when I went to grad school and was studying formal history, I was also listening to these voices. I noticed, especially then, lots of sort of disjuncture between what I heard people talking about and what I saw in the history books. And I can listen to these people talking, review their videos. I mean, I've been doing this for, oh my gosh, Nick, how long is it? Is it close to 20 years? Are we that old already? No, not 20, 10 years, 10 years. Up more than 10 years. Oh my gosh, it's a long time I've been listening to these voices, and I can't stop. And I think, me personally, I've come to a point of, I think, developing my project as how can I say the least so they can say the most, because I'm never going to be as good of a storyteller as the wonderful people I had the opportunity to meet. And please let me open it up to Patricia and other people.
I think I see a couple of questions in the chat about funding and management, the scope and scale. I mean, I think, again, Andrea will have more to say. Mine is, it's a great example of, I'm a shoestring operation. I'm a podcaster on an absolute shoestring, but my message is, of course, it can happen, and it can be full of richness and surprises and rewards. But I'll just turn it to Andrea because it's a bigger scale of obviously what she's working on.
Yeah, funding's really difficult, and it's changing very quickly right now. And it's also changing in ways that have changed university press budgets. So I know I talked a lot about Stanford digital publications. They were Mellon funded, and the Mellon Foundation in particular, for about 5 years or so, really funded a lot in this whole field of born digital scholarly publishing. I was lucky enough to have an NEH grant that was sort of a sub-fund from the Mellon Foundation. But a lot of that money has started to disappear. So now I know that, for instance, Stanford Digital Press, which I really only just learned yesterday, is opening up to digital publications again after their Mellon Foundation ran out. In order to do that work now, they require a $15,000 subvention from the author, which, as I see from faces, is a very big ask, right? So it's a really changing landscape. There is funding out there. I know most of the decisions I made in terms of development made it so that I had very limited costs on my end. The big cost was we did invest in some transcription software, and I'm happy to talk about why I don't believe AI is enough and why we still needed 4 years and a big team of people doing a lot of work. But besides that, you know, I tried to use pretty much open source and freely available tools. However, unfortunately, that landscape is also really changing as people don't know how to support open source tools in a moment of contraction. So, I mean, my biggest takeaway is like, definitely save all your materials in non-proprietary formats and think about how they can be moved from one thing to another. And also to think about the necessity. I mean, for me, this project could only ever be a digital project. And so I think those are the projects, sort of, unless you're at an institution with lots of money and lots of funding, I think we really have to think about the necessity of it.
Such a thoughtful response. With your permission, I'd like to answer Professor Abul-Negah's question about getting over one's fear of beginning. And as I mentioned at the top of my remarks, I not only had never done a podcast, but I never even listened to a podcast. So I didn't know what they were. I mean, I kind of knew what they were. So I basically just sort of started shopping around online and listening to, there's a lot of how-to information on YouTube and other platforms where people are sharing their experiences and how they started. And some of them are really canned and impersonal. And they're doing it for their sponsor because they're pushing some little piece of technology or whatever. But I don't know if you remember my last slide, I said, there's a little quote from someone who I follow. Her name is Zaniqua. And it says, she signs off every how-to video she does with, "We're afraid, but we still create." She goes, "We're afraid, but we still create," right? This kiddo must be 19 years old. She's a very young person. And she just really inspires me. I mean, again, you just have to find a little inspiration, a little encouragement. But in other words, the fear doesn't really go away, but what it's partnered with is like, people hear you and then they affirm you and they're like, "Hi, I live in Granada, Spain. Can I be on your show?" And you're like, "Of course you can." And let me also say, part of what inspired me to create was I was going begging to podcasters who I tried to educate myself, and there are some very good history podcasts out there. And I was pitching myself. I was writing pleading emails. I was even sending videos of myself saying, "Here's why you want me on your podcast." I'm telling you, I'm just throwing stuff against the wall. And they were all radio silence, nothing, not even a response. So I'm like, okay. So you just have to kind of go through this and have a sense of humor. And then I literally walk up the street to my university. It's like, "Oh, I'm going to be on so-and-so's podcast." I'm like, "Oh, great. They wouldn't even answer my email." It's like just completely humiliating, you know? But you have to have a sense of humor. And that's why I decided to create, and the rewards are just there. So I wish you all the best. I put my email in the chat. I'll put it again. And just email me if you want to see my scripts, if you want to, just chat. Happy to offer more encouragement. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, and I definitely say don't be scared. There's a lot of humor. There's a lot of determination and grit. There's a kind of game we can play with grants where we wait for the grant to start the work, but you can't really do that because the grant needs you to sort of have a track record. So you just have to sort of keep it moving, find your communities. Community is really important. My project would have never happened if I hadn't been able to find so many people who were excited to help listen and engage with these interviews and do the work of really becoming like a community of listening. In terms of learning, like Patricia said, I mean, one of the ways I basically sort of forced myself into becoming a digital humanities, digital historian. I basically became it to do this project. And that meant, right, I had to learn sort of the platform I'm using, Scalar. So what did I do? I taught half my classes in Scalar. And I learned alongside with my students, get really familiar with it, like your students teach you, right? I think once we step into this world, which I think Roger has been really good at framing a lot with his collective, once we step into this world, we have to sort of acknowledge we're never going to be an expert in everything. We're always both a learner and a teacher, and really sort of accepting that role, I think is sort of where we have to, the place we have to live.
May I speak? May I? Okay. My name is Hadira Bunnaga. I'm professor of English literature and translation. I'm based in Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia, and I'm originally from Egypt. I've met Roger years ago when we were. I was part of digital humanities of Global Middle Ages project, what I really like about both of the projects that, hello Roger, hello. We have a long story, long history of friendship and collegiality going back. What I really like about both projects, which is my fear, which is there is this social media and podcasting and all what's going on in social media, and at the same time you want to introduce something that is scholarly respected, and it is educational, it is academic, it is not just a podcast. So what I really like about these two projects is the ability to combine both, to produce something that is engaging, interesting, and at the same time academic, educational, respected, something that you will not be hesitant to show in your classroom, something that you will be proud of after 10 years and for generations to come, and something that you will document for the history of the people, for the history of humanities. So I've been thinking about doing something similar for years and years now. I even have some notebooks full of thoughts and ideas, but there is this, fear of being out there, like it's exactly like when you publish a book or when you publish an article, a research paper, and this fear of the comments that may happen or the criticism that you may face. But now with the podcast, with this such projects, it's even more complicated. It's even more, because you are out there and you're open. You're in the open. Anyone can say anything. So this is what, to me, this is the struggle, the challenge, and the hurdle, and also what I like about what Patricia said is that hiring someone to help you at the beginning, maybe to help with the technicalities, and with what Andrea said, the management. This is a huge work, and even the title, Born Digital. It doesn't have to be, written documentation. It doesn't have anymore. I mean, this is more what is required in the public, and so it's really, really great work that you are doing. And I'm hoping that one day I will get over the fear, maybe by, maybe I will contact you and maybe get some tips and, initial steps and motivation. Thank you so much. And thank you, Roger, for always bringing such wonderful people and connecting us with such, advanced scholars and, good work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. If I could just chime in, thank you for your very moving comments. I think in terms of being worried about pushback and trolls and etc. If there's comments on my YouTube page, I don't read them. I didn't even think to read them. And I think you can turn them off. You don't have to allow comments. And so that's been the thing I didn't know about podcasting. It's not about, oh, no one's going to subscribe. That's not what it's about. It's that you create an asset for your colleagues and then they share it in their networks. So it's a little bit different than having that cultic following. And I mean that in a friendly way. I'm not trying to be overly critical. It's more about creating value for your guests and for your colleagues, and then they share in their network. So that's where I come down on it. But I have my subjectivity and my positionality, and everyone has their own place in the world, and not everyone has the privilege of not expecting pushback. And so I want to really thank you for being so vulnerable with us and honest about we're all in a different space, and not all of us feel so empowered to just get out there and start. So thank you for the comment. I'm grateful. Let me know how I can help.
Nick,
Andrea.
I saw you had a question. I don't know if you want to voice it, Nick. Oh. Okay, I see it. So you asked us about formal history and how we see this work moving the discipline in new directions. And Patricia, you also straddle book history and public history divide. What have you found most challenging in that regard? I don't know. Patricia, would you like to start?
Sure, thank you. Thanks for the question, Nick. Nice to see you. One of the frustration, I said the podcast was born in consternation. One of the things that my former mentor, current mentor, and Dan and I struggle was as authors, as creators, we know that the book as a technology has never been stronger. The appetite for books is voracious. Reading and listening to books is strong. And yet the industry is in chaos, right? Accessing it, navigating it, trying to, God forbid, maybe make a little money. I mean, goodness. I mean, we give our work away virtually for free. So that was a real conundrum for us. And it's still one. But basically, the way we straddle this divide, to answer Nick's question, is that pretty much every podcast focuses on a book. So we're sort of lifting up scholarship, somewhat traditional scholarship. I mean, Pablo Lopez's role-playing game about La Desbandada is a little of an exception. But for example, I interviewed a colleague named Carmen Ripolles, whom folks in the room may know. She has a new book. She's an early modern art historian. She has a new book out on Josefa de Obidos. And so, but she's from Burriana near Valencia. So we had the first part of the podcast about her family story, about enduring the Civil War and early Francoism. But the bulk of the podcast was really about her book on early modern women painters in Iberia. So there's some flexibility there to lift up scholarship. And in fact, I can't remember who said it already this morning, but I've assigned that podcast to my Women in World History class so that my students can learn about Josefa de Obidos and also have a different way of grasping scholarship through a podcast. It's quite substantial, short, but substantial. So I think it's jazzing up my teaching too. So that's another way that I've straddled that divide.
And I guess if I were to answer the how I see sort of the work I'm doing, moving the discipline in new directions, I think, especially when my project was in the collaborative phase, and very much I hear this in Patricia's discussion as well, collaboration can be, A, we can be collaborative, and B, collaboration can also be an objective in and of itself, right? Creating new communities. I think that's really important work that the Academy needs, right? Communities of researchers, communities of listeners. You know, in the context of Spain, I think there's been a real reticence to listen, especially among historians, or at least historians of a previous generation, where there was this idea that history and memory are two separate things and never shall the two mix. And I know what I'm really trying to do is really to question that. How, as historians, do we have the context to listen deeply? And also, I think in our sort of world where there's not a lot of listening going on, right? How can historical training be about learning how to listen, learning how to recognize other people's subject positions and the kind of very hard decisions they have to make without it simply being there's the good side and the bad side. So I think these are really important things. I think also with, you know, this is maybe way out there, but I also think with generative AI, which does a really amazing, whether we like it or not, amazing job at synthesizing, I think we also have to think about, I know many of us are historians in this room, I think we have to think about, well, what are the other things that historians can do? Because we're very good at things. And maybe that goes beyond just synthesizing if AI has become so good at that. And so what do those things look like?
So well said. I'm going to say that in a department meeting, and I will cite you.
No, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Morgan, do you have something? The terrible teacher in me sees thoughts in people's facial expressions and wants to pull them out. So I don't know if there's something you're thinking about, Morgan.
No, not real. I'm just like digesting everything, and I think that it's been an excellent presentation. Although I do wonder, how did you do the project management for your Scalar 2 project? Because it looked intense and impressive.
Firstly, I don't let anyone else touch the website besides myself. So that part has been really clear. So essentially we had really extensive like Google folders, and we used Trello when Trello's a project management software that's very visual, which was really helpful for a team, where we could have sort of all our resources and visualize sort of how much has been transcribed where. So it was a lot of really trying to have sort of a centralized format. We had sort of extensive project documentation. I mean, pages and pages and pages of sort of what to do when somebody swears, or what to do when they trail off when they're speaking, or what to do when it's a Spanish language interview and they start going into Catalan because they're a native Catalan speaker, or they're reliving their time in a Nazi concentration camp and go into German. How do we transcribe or translate that? So we had sort of very rich ways of sort of sharing documents and documentation and sort of meeting on a regular basis, which was kind of part of the community building as well, and doing it that way. But when it comes to sort of the website, I think you have to make certain decisions as a project manager that everything that you manage, I think, is worth really having documented, because otherwise you have to sort of reteach a new generation the whole things. And I think you have to make certain decisions on when is it more work to train and to create that documentation, and when is it sort of more effective to just sort of hold certain things within your own domain and have that sort of as part of your own practice. So, I mean, and that can be a moving target, an iterative target. But yeah, that would be my answer. Yes, Dr. Ramona. I think your microphone is still on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, sorry about that. Thank you so much for both of your presentations. They're wonderful. I'm at the African American Research Library in Fort Lauderdale, and I'm a librarian, but I'm a cultural heritage informaticist. So we've had a couple of projects here. Virtual reality with a Harlem Renaissance digital humanities project with the University of Arizona. And we also were part of a Mellon Foundation grant with Florida International University. It was called the Community Data Curation Project. And the great thing, and I really want to thank Patricia when she said how important it is to cross-pollinate, that we come together with all of our expertise, because that project brought 8 community organizations together, and they represented the Jewish community, the Haitian community, the graffiti community, the African American community. It was a really nice mixture of people, and we were able to digitize one of our collections, our second largest collections here. Dr. Niara Sudarkasa was an anthropologist, and she went to Fisk University at 15 years old from Fort Lauderdale. And so those students were able to learn that whole process of digitization, but they also did public programming as well. That was part of the grant. We had to do public programming. So I really thank you both for your work. It's incredible. And I do want to keep in touch with both of you because I think, you know, it's powerful. I went to the University of South Carolina, and we had some great digital humanities projects there as well. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for your work.
And thank you. You actually remind me, we can never thank our institutional and library partners enough. Interpretation starts with them, preservation and access starts with them. Our work is nowhere without community organizations and heritage institutions. So thank you for your work.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Ramona. I went back to school after my big sabbatical in Spain. I was so bowled over by the archives that I was in. It was really a kind of embodied experience to be present in so many hundreds, in some cases, thousands of years of history. I went back to library school, and I got a half of an MLS. I got a certificate in archives and records management, because perhaps like you out here in Oregon, we do a lot of collection development because history is very raw here. I just wonder if you would share a little bit, just picking up on Andrea's point about multilingual. I suspect your projects are quite multilingual. Do you have anything you'd like to make sure we know as a group about your experience or some advice? I'm just guessing. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure. Well, you know, being here in South Florida, near Miami, of course, we have a large Bahamian community, Haitian community. So that's been a challenge in terms of language and how do we, you know, access some of these other languages, of Creole, for example. I'm also a 6th generation Gullah Geechee woman. My parents are from South Carolina. So I've been doing that cultural heritage work for over 2 decades, just in terms of the importance of that information and the connection to Barbados. I, like you, went to Barbados and spent several years doing my research in their archives. And again, like you said, they're like hundreds of years old, and it was pretty amazing to go through those. Both of you are historians, so you know what I'm talking about. But I think the work continues. It's important to connect with the younger people in these communities. We're working with Dr. Charlene Desir, who is an education professor at Nova Southeastern University. And she's been doing specific pedagogy related to Haitian students. And she did a program where she worked with students from when they were like in 8th grade. And now, they did like summers, like summer camps, and now they're all adults, and one is a pharmacist, and one is, and we brought them back to talk about those programs and how it helps them and so forth. So just really connecting how we can in other, both community and institutional work has been really important. Dr. Charlene just said, just hosted a large voodoo conference here at Nova Southeastern University, and it was amazing. There were scholars from across the world, not just the country, and just trying to, keep the ivory tower open, if you will. So that's it for me. Thank you so much for that.
Very rich, very inspiring. Thank you.
I put my contact information in the chat as well, so we can keep in touch.
Thank you. So I have a question for Andrea. So I'm sure many people in this call understand on some level that our work, it's hard to feel done. When is something done? When you just have to stop? How do you, so just wondering how you navigate some of that. Do you feel like parts of it are done? Is it done? I mean, I'm being a little lighthearted here, but it's actually a serious question, because breaking chunks down into a classroom, into a grant, I'd love to hear just your perspective of like what parts are done, what does done mean, kind of thing.
Yeah, and this was, and I'll answer this as well as Morgan's question too. It is not public yet. I'm hoping to submit to a press early January, February. So it does have a completion date that we're rapidly approaching. I think for digital projects, right, there are a lot of different approaches, and some are to do it more openly. I think because of specific institutional relations, where I was not at the institution that was hosting the collection. And so I think there was a little confusion, for instance, at my own institution when I first started this project, and but also maybe I couldn't yet articulate all the ways in which it was going to be scholarly. I think there was initial concern and maybe even expectations that I was maybe doing grunt work for UC San Diego and their special collections. So it became clear that, and not to be territorial, of course, like that's the last thing, but I knew that there were certain things I had to protect in order to also sort of think about my career. And also I knew that the second these transcriptions and translations become available, I really think this collection is going to be used in ways it's never been used before. And I think there's going to be a lot of publication coming out. And I think sort of the one sort of gift I gave myself, maybe it was like collecting tithes or something weird like that, where I was like, okay, if I've managed this whole thing, the one thing I want to do is sort of be able to write the first go through with the entire collection. And well, I think everyone in this audience is sort of nodding their head like this is fair. I also do want to share that was that kind of also ripped me apart, having to sort of play the academic game and to feel having to be possessive and protective, right? And I think it's a really hard balance, and as Patricia mentioned, probably even a harder balance for different subject positions and in different kinds of universities. And it takes a lot of, I think, emotional and professional thinking to figure out sort of what's okay, what's not okay. It's a hard one. But yes, it should be going to a publisher soon. You might be getting an email from me of like, help me raise $15,000. I hope not. I have some money for my institution. But I hope once it gets to a publisher, it won't be a hugely long wait until it comes out to the public. But it will be available open access for sure.
Wow, thank you for that illuminating discussion. And so when you say doing a little fundraising, it's sort of like a subvention for the press to take it on. Yeah, this is, it's just like a back chatter that I can pick up in my world. Maybe folks are more clued in, but this idea that the world is moving toward open access, but the cost is going to be borne largely by practitioners, by authorpreneurs. We got to keep our eye on that because some gross inequities are going to be compounded and ramified very quickly. And so thank you for your candor, and you know, every dollar counts. So even if we can only give a little, it'll add up. We got you.
Well, shall we, unless there's sort of final remarks or questions, thank you everyone for showing up. Thank you to the Plus Ultra Collective. Thank you to Patricia. Please stay in touch with us and also the broader community. Thank you for being here and such really thoughtful comments and questions.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Andrea. Much love. Get out there and create. You got this. And please contact me anytime. Love to be helpful. Take care, everyone. Bye.